Hey everyone, I go by V Lauren on social media, but you can call me Victoria, and welcome to Witness to Glory. So if you're new here and you don't know what Witness to Glory is not just a series about church photography, it's about so much more. Diving deep into the heart behind what we do as photographers. Who we are behind the lens matters just as much as who we photograph through our lens. If you're captivated by the intersection of faith and photography, this series is tailored for you. So I received this comment a few months ago and I wanted to give a thoughtful response to it. I think it perfectly summarizes the content contained within this series, and it ends with this question. In all of your engagement and effort in trying to document the history of the church, making flattering photos, capturing candid moments, and seeing to it that you spur one another on toward love and good deeds through photography, how do you not miss out on the benefits of the services, like the worship, praise, sermon sessions, those times that require sitting down, paying keen attention, taking notes, and all of that? So I thought it'd be best to break down what church looks like for me as a church photographer. And so I'm going to break this down through answering a series of questions. So my first question is, how do I document the service while actually staying engaged in it? I like the fact that I have the duality of being a part of the church as well as being an observer to it. So for me, documentation is my way of engagement. My photos are a reflection of what I witnessed and experienced along with the congregation. So if I'm photographing a service, I have to be present. I have to be just as engaged or even more engaged than the congregants or those participating in the worship service. And I have to do that because I'm the one that's going to be telling the story through my photography. So I believe that in order to work in excellence as a church photographer, engagement is a crucial part of the process. So engagement allows me to be present, to anticipate and perceive what's happening, or notice if there's any shifts or changes in the order of service so that I can better prepare myself on how to capture those moments. There are times when I'm photographing a sermon with a telephoto lens, and I can sense that the pastor is going to do an altar call that is different than an altar call for salvation. Because I'm shooting with a telephoto lens to photograph the pastor preaching, I need to swap lenses and get a wide angle lens. If I'm not engaged and if I'm not present, I might miss that. And I need to pay attention to those type of moments because it changes how I'm going to document the service. Because if I have a telephoto lens, I'm not going to be able to capture the vast amount of people that come to the altar for that particular type of altar call. I have to pay attention, I have to observe. I have to be just as actively engaged as everybody else in order not to miss certain moments so that I can know, where do I need to position myself? How do I need to move about the sanctuary in order to document it? So documentation is my way of being engaged and present in the service. So the next question is, what does praise look like for a church photographer? Now, for me, I don't like to answer things unless I have a clear definition, a clear working definition. So let's define praise. So this is from the International Standard Bible Encyclopedia. So praise is described as ascribing value or worth through confession, thanksgiving, stretching out one's hands, and glorifying. So true praise consists in a sincere acknowledgement of a real conviction of worth. And to go further, because I just can't be satisfied with that definition, I gotta go in depth. I'm a detail-oriented person. So this is from the Topical Encyclopedia. Praise can be expressed in various forms, including singing, speaking, praying, and living a life that honors God, which means that it's not limited to specific times or places, but is a lifestyle. So I 100% agree that praise is a lifestyle, and it's not relegated to church alone. If you're only praising on Sunday, then something's amiss. Praise is a part of my daily life. So in singing and speaking and praying and living a life that seeks to honor God. So Sunday is no exception. On Sundays and other times during the week, I have the privilege of photographing the praises of others. When I'm actually taking photos, because of how my mind works, I have to be engaged in one thing. I cannot multitask. So like if I'm documenting the service, I'm documenting the service. And I don't feel like I'm losing out from my personal praise by documenting the praises of others, because that is my assignment and that is me fulfilling my assignment obligation. But because, praise is a lifestyle and I praise outside, I engage in praise outside of taking photographs. For me, it's just all a part of that same experience, if that makes sense. So praise doesn't look any different for me. As a photographer, it's going to look the same as the people that I'm photographing. It's just in that moment while they're engaged in praise, I'm photographing them. Hope that makes sense. Next question. What does worship look like for a church photographer? So similarly to how I provided a definition for praise, I of course have to provide a definition for worship. And I did like a little mini study of worship. So I used the Matthew Henry's Concise Commentary, Matthew Poole's Commentary, Barnes Notes, Cambridge Bible for Schools and Colleges, Vincent Word Studies Commentary, and Benson Commentary. And then also the International Standard Bible Encyclopedia. And so this is like my summary of it before I actually give you how do I, as a church photographer, engage in worship. So worship in the Old Testament is depicted as bowing down, prostrating oneself, and or kissing toward. Worship was seen as an individual and private matter, but not necessarily a secret one. When an individual worships publicly, they gain blessing and force from the presence of others. Throughout the scriptures, we see examples of public worship through temple worship, synagogue worship, and the worship that grew out of the Christian church. And so the worship that grew out of the Christian church stems back to Jesus telling the Samaritan woman in John 4:23 that the time has now come when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for the Father is seeking such as these to worship him. Now, to provide some context for this verse, Samaritans knew very little about the one they worshipped, whereas their Jewish counterparts knew all about the one they worshipped, especially since salvation comes first to and through them. But what Jesus says in John 4:23 meant that this was all going to change. Gone are the days of worshiping without rule or prescript like the Samaritans, or even performing rituals out of hypocrisy like the Pharisees, or offering sacrifices that were unable to clear the conscience of even the most devout. Jesus says to the Samaritan woman that those days are gone. And what's coming and is now is a more spiritual worship, where the heart offered to God is not dependent on external forms of acceptance. This spiritual worship would not be restricted to the limitations of time and place, like the mountain or the temple, as God is spirit, and is neither bounded by such limitations, practically meaning that this is a new time where he can be worshipped in every place and any place wherever the true worshipers are. Since our worship to him comes from our spirit, anywhere our spirit is, we can worship. Worshiping in spirit and in truth implies that our souls bow, prostrate, lay before, kiss toward God. Essentially, true worship is more than sincerity, but allowing our spirit to devote our souls and bodies to God. When I think about this, it just kind of blows my mind. The doctrine of worship that Jesus presents to the Samaritan woman is truly a God idea in how universal it is. No matter who you are, where you are, or what you do, you're to worship him. So that's my answer. So what does worship look like for a church photographer? After summarizing all of that, well, just that. It means devoting our entire being to God. Paul pleads with believers in Romans 12:1 to present your bodies, dedicating all of yourselves set apart as a living sacrifice, holy and well-pleasing to God, which is your rational, logical, intelligent act of worship. And because sacrifices are deeply rooted in the Jewish tradition, that means we can physically offer God our lives as a sacrifice. And so this means that our worship is ongoing. It's not relegated to a church service. Worship as a church photographer isn't solely about taking photos, although that can be a part of your act of worship. But more importantly, it's about living sacrificially for God. It's resisting sin, serving others, and prioritizing God's kingdom in our daily decision making. It's prayer, praise, and fasting. It's whether we're eating or drinking or anything else, we do all for the glory of God. And so taking pictures can be a part of that process. It's living a life that is pleasing to Him. And a life that is pleasing to Him is the one that is found in Jesus Christ, who is our eternal life. So all of our sins are washed away because of Jesus' ultimate sacrifice. And our response is that we give our lives back to Him. So it's not about a ritualistic routine or mere sincerity, but a life and a lifestyle that reasonably and logically responds to God's mercy. And because He's been merciful to us, we function as living sacrifices. We present ourselves to Him. So our mind, our emotions, our words, our hands, our feet, no aspect of our lives or bodies is exempt. And it's not just a thing that's just in church, because our worship isn't relegated to one place. Wherever our spirit is, we have the opportunity to worship God. So it's not just church, but at our workplaces, homes, and in our neighborhoods, publicly and secretly. Since He is everywhere, so will our worship be. When I think of praise, it's more so task specific, like singing, clapping, speaking well of. Whereas when I think of worship, I think of the fruits of the Spirit, traits that are character defining. It's not just what we do, but the heart behind it. And then that can be applied to how we take photos. What is the heart behind us taking photos? So I believe that taking photos can be an act or form of worship, and that it can serve other people's, to be encouraged. Actually, crazy thing is that recently I took photos on a Sunday, and those pictures ended up making it onto social media. And so somebody came up to me the following Sunday and said that there was a photo that I took of her and her family. And I was trying to go through my mental catalog of what photo exactly was that. Then I remember what photo it was, because it was an emotional moment. She said it made her cry because it was such a beautiful moment that I captured. So our photos can be a part of an act of serving other people, but it's also the heart behind us taking the pictures. I don't often do this, but the times that I do, when I look back over my work and the photos that I captured, I'm it makes me in awe of God's goodness and mercy towards me, but then also to the people in the images too. So out of that, I think flows a heart of worship. It should all point back to giving glory to God. This is how we get to be witnesses to glory. So that's my long answer regarding what does worship look like for a church photographer. Next question. How do I, as a church photographer, listen to sermons, pay keen attention, take notes, etc.? So now, full disclaimer, I do not take full notes as congregants typically do, but the thing is, I have to pay keen attention to what is said. Because what I like to do is I like to take direct quotes from the speaker or the pastor. So what happens is that I would either ask someone to take notes for me and share those notes with me after service, or sometimes I re-listen to the sermons, usually at twice the speed, to hear if I missed anything that I could quote and save. So I like to take quotes, direct quotes from the sermon, and I like to either after the fact or during, if I'm actively listening to the sermon, I would like to capture images that are a reflection of what was said or what was preached, so that they can be used later on, so that I can have the words and the images to match the narrative. I want to actually share with you some of my favorite sermon quotes and some of the notes that I've taken that bless me every time I think about them. So the first one is, which is this is my top, and this is from actually a sermon that was preached during Black History Month, and it's the quote says, "God can revive what looks lost." The next quote, this was taken, I think, during Christmas. "In this dark world, you need the light. Everything changes when Jesus becomes your light. Jesus is the light that shapes our worship." The next one that I have is obedience is proof of faith and one's love of God. I also liked this quote I took. I don't remember when this sermon was delivered. What God has delivered us from is greater than the Red Sea. Faith praises God under pressure. Jesus is the shepherd who gathers us in his arms and carries us close to his heart. And I like this because the speaker who said this was a cardiologist. Top 2 favorite sermons preached: be like Andrew, go get your family and bring them to Jesus. Okay, this is another one. Faithfulness is sticking with God's way through every season. I also not only pay attention to what is said during the sermon, but I also pay attention to what is said throughout the whole entire service. So anytime somebody has a mic, I pay attention to what they're saying and what they're communicating, because sometimes I can pull quotes, especially during the opening of the service where the pastor is welcoming people. I pay attention to what is said just in case I need to use that language for other purposes later on. So there was one time during the opening of Bible study where the pastor said something and I said, let me go write this down. So I put my camera down and I pulled out my phone and I said, let me go write this down because this is good. And while he was welcoming the people who are viewing online, he said, Lord, let nothing fascinate us more than being with you. And I said, that is a great quote. I don't take notes, I take quotes. Because sometimes I do bounce around during the sermon. Like I can photograph the main sanctuary, I can photograph the youth and children's services that are happening concurrently, or I can photograph those in the media room or those in sound to get a behind the scenes of like what it looks like while the sermon is actually going on. So because I'm doing that, I can't always sit down and take notes, but because I have somebody taking notes for me, but if I hear a quote, I can always pull out my phone and type it down. And if I don't get the wording perfectly, I will then go back and re-listen to the sermon at twice the speed to make sure that I get the quote exactly right. Next question. Do you have other engagements / routines that might hamper your productivity / effectiveness? So if you don't know, photography, especially church photography, is not my full-time job. But with that being said, so yes, my answer is yes. I do have outside work and responsibilities that can hamper my productivity as a church photographer. No one has the perfect work-life balance. Prioritization is important for me. But the thing is, I make sure that I devote Sundays for Sunday's activities and purposes. Now, if there are church services that happen throughout the course of the work week, then that's a little bit different. But definitely for Sunday, I make sure that I shoot, edit, and do same day delivery of the photos. When it comes to photographing, say like a midweek service or like a Bible study, that's a little bit different. The deadlines aren't as strict. And because I also have control over my schedule and moving things and shifting things, I do make sure that when it comes to church photography, that is a number one priority of mine. I schedule my other bookings around my church photography schedule. So that's what helps me with managing my productivity and effectiveness, is that when it comes to other photography related things, I make sure that I prioritize the church work first, because I know I need to get my church photos out and get those things done before I start bringing in new photos and have like this backlog. So that's kind of how I'm able to stay effective and productive as a church photographer, because these personal engagements can hamper that, but I make sure that for me, that is a top priority of mine. So next question, which is the last question, is how do you cope with the loads of photography and editing work? Do you have a kind of human assistance with the work? Okay, so because I do photography outside of church, editing church photos is actually the easiest part, because I already have presets that I could easily put on, and I try to make my shooting as effective as possible. I try not to overshoot. I try to actively cull during the services. Like sometimes I chimp, so I look at the images, delete them when I have some downtime, so that I can chip out the culling process ahead of time before I actually import the photos into Lightroom. And then in Lightroom, I I could just easily put my presets on and, just make these little corrections here and there and we're good to go. But also, in my experience with managing a photography business is that when it rains, it pours. Suddenly, everybody has events on the same day, the same weekend, and, I can find myself in a situation where I'm booking like back to back. It's not so much the actual day of shooting, it's the editing work that comes after that things can like pile on. But I try my best to avoid those things, but especially in the recent months, there's kind of like been an uptick, which is a blessing. That's not a bad thing. But I usually like move some things around in my personal work schedule to give me time and space to edit my work. Prioritization is key for me as a photographer, but also I think the main important thing when it comes to photography is shooting well. Because if you shoot well, then you won't have to spend a whole lot of time editing. When it comes to church photography, I have the privilege of experiencing church services in a very unique way. And I don't miss out on the benefits of the services. I enjoy worship, praise, sermon, note-taking. And plus, I love the fact that I get to be clued in on the inner workings of what's happening throughout the flow of the service. Photographing services makes me more aware, attentive, discerning, and not just when it comes to the actions of other people's, but also my actions and how my presence is affecting what is happening and going on. So I'd love to hear your response to some of these questions. Let me know, what does praise/worship look like for you as a church photographer? How do you listen to sermons and pay keen attention, take notes, etc.? Essentially, how do you engage with your church's services as the photographer? So I would love to hear your thoughts about that. As I said before, for me, documentation is my way of engagement, and I do believe that my photos are a reflection of a real and personal experience as a witness to glory.